Monday, September 18th, we knew that Hurricane Hugo may come up the eastern seaboard and be a threat to the Charleston area. We had already seen the destruction Hugo had brought in St. Croix in Puerto Rico. We knew Hugo was a killer. I'm Rob Fowler. We started bringing you hourly updates on the tracking of Hurricane Hugo. We also told you to prepare in terms of buying supplies. By Wednesday, Hurricane Hugo had gotten stronger and continued moving toward us. A hurricane watch was issued.
Nails, hammers, and plywood are in hot demand tonight on Folly Beach. Residents are boarding up their windows and doors in hopes of saving their beachfront property from the vicious storm. You worried it may go this time?
Well, I'm not worried. I'm reconciled to it. So, you know, if it goes, it goes. We've enjoyed it for 35 years, so what else can you ask?
Mary Connor's backyard is the Atlantic Ocean. 4 generations have lived in this wood house, and Connor hopes it's still around for the 5th. But she isn't holding her breath. The Tetrick family is just as pessimistic. Pictures were removed from the walls today and lamps dismantled, just in case the windows shatter.
We don't expect anything to be here when we come back.
Others are simply packing up the family and moving out. They've been through this before.
That's about all for this storm.
Ever been through one of these before?
3 of them over here. And we just don't want to take any chances. We live on James Island. It's much easier to get on James Island than stay on Folly Beach and sweat it out.
Here on Seabrook Island, only a handful of houses have been boarded up. Many of the residents don't live here year-round, but time is running out to protect their investment. Over on Bohicket Creek, some boat owners have put their vessels out to sea. Others are tying them down at the docks and waiting out the storm. Hospitals in downtown Charleston are preparing for the worst. Most of them already have emergency disaster plans, and now hospitals are putting their plans in gear. That may include sending patients home.
Those that are not absolutely required to be in an acute care hospital will probably be asked to triage out to other facilities or to their home.
But for those patients who can't be discharged, extra supplies are being brought in. Roper Hospital brought in 700 gallons of bottled water and will receive 1,000 more gallons by tomorrow. Hospital officials are also checking their generators to make sure they're ready to go. At Roper, the system generates enough energy to power the half of the hospital, which will be needed most during the storm.
We're calling family members this morning to just alert them that we are preparing for evacuation.
Nursing homes are also making plans for the hurricane. Sandpiper Convalescent Center in Mount Pleasant will be sending patients to homes of relatives or placing them in hotels. Those who need 24-hour supervised care will be placed in hospitals.
We're in constant contact with emergency preparedness, so they will advise us. And it will be a joint decision between our administrator and emergency preparedness as to when we go.
That could be as early as tomorrow. If the hurricane continues in our direction, most hospitals say their emergency plans will go into effect tomorrow, which means their staffs will begin working around the clock to keep the hospital in operation during the storm. Angela Brown, TV2 Action News, Charleston.
Ladies and gentlemen, Charleston County is now under a state of emergency. It is anticipated that Hurricane Hugo will be in the Charleston area earlier than first reported. Gale force winds are predicted by 3 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, making weather conditions and travel conditions very dangerous. It is imperative that all residents of Charleston County, especially those living in beach areas, low-lying areas, barrier islands, property adjacent to tidal creeks, and all mobile home residents in the county leave as soon as possible.
By daybreak Thursday, the hurricane watch was upgraded to a hurricane warning. An evacuation order was given to residents of barrier islands and low-lying areas likely to flood. As the winds began to rage and the rain began to fall, the tide along Charleston's Battery began to rise. By 11 o'clock tonight, city officials expect the storm surge from Hurricane Hugo will sweep over the Battery walls and into the streets.
The greatest danger to life is rising water.
Mayor Riley today announced a mandatory evacuation of all single-story homes along the peninsula and strongly urged others to get out of town as well. Many residents boarded up, gassed up, and got out. By 3 o'clock, many of the streets of Charleston were already empty, and there was that eerie feeling that we were taking pictures of the calm before the storm. In otherwise empty streets, some residents are loading up sandbags. Families who plan to ride out the storm are finding themselves making what could be costly last-minute decisions.
At first it was fun and exciting, but now it's just getting too serious, and we're realizing there's just some things we can't save.
At the Charleston Marina, Oscar Fitzhenry made last-minute adjustments to try to save his boat. Now he's out to try to save himself.
Put the anchor chain that direction and just commit it to the Lord now.
And the tide continues to rise. St. Brian, TV2 Action News, Charleston.
It looks a lot like a ghost town out here. As you can see, the wind is really beginning to pick up now. We can really feel that a storm is approaching. And if you look behind me, we're here as we're entering the Isle of Palms. Those police officers are stopping motorists as they try to enter the island. And unless they have an extremely good excuse, such as a medical emergency or having to pick up a relative, particularly an elderly relative, they're not going to get on the island. They simply aren't going to let them go. The island is literally shut down in preparations for Hurricane Hugo. And as this storm gets ever closer, there is a real growing sense of concern here on the Isle of Palms and on Sullivan's Island. The couple that lives in this Sullivan's Island home are celebrating the birth of a baby. The sign says it's a boy, and it's a big boy named Hugo. We found these men boarding up. When they're finished, they will leave Sullivan's Island.
Just for being safe, plus it helps everybody over here, all the emergency people, you know, they ain't got to worry about a lot of people on the island, so that's just easier for them. And
this couple is busy getting their belongings off the floor. They, too, are loading up their car and heading inland.
It's dangerous. I mean, I'd rather be alive, and, you know, I can't replace myself for Joe and replace our valuables.
She, of course, is absolutely right. And on the Isle of Palms, those trying to get onto the island are met with this.
Sir, may I help you? Yeah, I need to go to 35th Avenue to board up a house that we may start.
Isle of Palms Mayor Carmen Bunch says 75% of the island has been evacuated. Most residents have been cooperative.
We might find one or two that have refused to leave, and I understand what we're doing is taking down their name, their list, and the next of kin, and letting them know that we'll warn them to get off, and if they don't want to go, other than carrying them out and handcuffing them, we can't force them.
The Navy moved its ships out to sea early in the day. Also, the State Ports Authority moved its trucks and containers. Roads were clogged most of the day as thousands of people heeded the evacuation order and headed inland to places like Atlanta, Augusta, and Columbia. But there were also those who thought Hugo was like many other storms that had come and gone. They were going to stay and brave out the storm.
As the countdown to landfall continues, Hurricane Hugo continues to telegraph what lies ahead.
We're the only ones left.
But still some refuse to listen. These residents on Folly Beach say they plan to stay and ride it out.
Right now we're about 13 foot above the water, but we don't think you're going to hit. So we're having a hurricane party.
But luckily most people in the low country are treating this storm with more respect. Most people recognize that these 8 to 10 foot swells and 30 to 40 mile an hour winds are just a very small taste of things to come.
Packing 120 mile per hour winds and expected to strike the Carolina coast at high tide, waves now rushing under this Folly Beach restaurant could soon be crashing over it. While police can't force everyone to leave, they have continued to make last-minute checks, making sure no one who wants to evacuate is left behind.
Like, for example, we have one woman that was invalid, had a nurse, and if the nurses leave, we're going to have to take her. You know, just take her for her own good because she can't take care of herself.
How strong this storm will actually be when it makes landfall is hard to predict. There's a good chance that those who choose to stand up to this storm and stare it in the eye may not be around to talk about it. On Folly Beach, Ren Scott, TV2 Action News.
Some people didn't have the means to evacuate the area but needed to leave their homes. So thousands of Charleston area residents crowded into shelters.
As Hugo draws near and the winds increase, evidently more residents are taking the storm more seriously. At Gaillard Auditorium, there's a separate section for families and women.
I think it's serious, and other people should think the same way.
It is the waiting that has caused the strain. Some are just sleeping the time away, while the children find ways of holding off the boredom.
Are you glad you're here? You glad you're here?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Do you feel safe?
Yeah.
Other smaller children are too young to know about the fears that you see in some of the wiser eyes.
Yeah, he's just 6 days old.
6 days old. Wow. How do you feel right now about what's happening?
Well, right now I'm happy I had some place to come to. I know that much. Bring the family. Well, you know, things start happening so fast. You know, I've been through it before, and so far God will take care of all of us. I hope he'll do it again this time.
And that is the wish of other families, like this one moving into the James Simmon Elementary School in Charleston. I'm Ted Knight, TV2 Action News, Charleston.
Lived here for 46 years, and the answer to that is there will be more flooding as a result of this storm than any Charlestonian has ever experienced. It will boggle the mind, and it is going to be extraordinary. So if you live in low-lying areas, take this remaining window of opportunity to evacuate.
You can see just to the southeast of the Charleston area, there's the eye of the storm, very, very potent storm. And as we mentioned, hurricane force winds extending 140 miles out from the center of Hurricane Hugo. Now, obviously, with a lot of rain possible, flash flood watches in effect for the entire state. Actually, this is for today and tomorrow. That includes all of the state of South Carolina.
You know, we've been advising these people for a day and a half, almost 2 days now, that this was going to be a dangerous storm, that the potential was there, the biggest threat potential in years. And it's almost ironic that 30 years almost to the day, Gracie came across this area. And I'm sure there were some people that did not heed the warnings that were given then, and there will be some now that did not heed the warnings. So basically try to fend for yourself. If you haven't moved yet and you're not planning to move, I hope the Lord has mercy on your soul and it helps you survive.
And because we are upgraded now to a Category 4, there is more concern about what will be done if we need to evacuate the hospitals. As I told you earlier, some military van-type vehicles may be used for that purpose. Also, SCE&G buses have already been used to evacuate at least one nursing home. These buses will become crucial throughout the storm for evacuations, especially evacuations of patients.
Hurricane Hugo. He is on his way. Rob says expected to make landfall around midnight or so.
Yeah, a little after midnight. Midnight and 2 the way. We need to mention that we are obviously going to leave our TV station, the studios in Mount Pleasant. I'll be going to the National Weather Service. You will be going to the Emergency Preparedness. So we also are evacuating the Mount Pleasant area, but we will continue to broadcast, give you the latest information.
And that we want to reiterate. We will stay on the air or make every attempt to bring you the information you need to have. Now, for all of us here at TV2 Action News, I'm Terry Casey. Good night. We will see you throughout the night. I went to Emergency Preparedness Headquarters with Leslie. We were broadcasting live at 10:15 that night when the announcement came.
Stay where you are. Hold secure.
As the roof started to rip off the building where we were, we ended up huddled in a concrete hallway, hoping we would live. Right now is the eye of Hurricane Hugo as it passes over the Charleston area. And it's only during this time, the calm, the temporary calm, that we're allowed to evacuate the Emergency Preparedness Center.
Where were you during Hurricane Hugo? That is a question that will be asked over and over again, similar to the shooting of JFK. I was here at the National Weather Service office in North Charleston, keeping you updated on the storm using their radar. It was quite scary here. A couple of times it sounded like the roof was being pulled off, and many of us ran down this hallway to the bathroom for protection. Terry Leslie and I kept Dan Ashley updated by phone. It was nearly midnight as Dan was doing an update from the transmitter. It wasn't very pretty, but Dan was the only broadcaster left on the air in the Low Country. If nothing else, it was information.
Good evening, everyone. Dan Ashley reporting live from our transmitter facility in Arundel. I spoke with our weather person, Rob Fowler, just a few minutes ago. He is at the National Weather Service office in North Charleston. He describes a very serious situation where he is right now. The eye wall, apparently, Rob tells me, is now moving across Charleston. That is when we expect that tremendous storm surge. We've heard reports of up to 18 feet of water. That is now, the eye wall is now moving forward across Charleston. The eye will not yet hit for perhaps another half hour or so. It's just off the coast now. wind speeds gusting up to 100 miles an hour downtown Charleston, a very serious situation. If you were with us a little while ago, we were reporting to you live outside, but it became obviously too serious and too dangerous for us to continue to do that, so we've moved inside to our studio here. Now, as we have been telling you, the worst, unfortunately, and we hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the worst is yet to come. The eye has not yet passed over us, and when it does, we will have perhaps an hour of very eerie, calm weather, and that will move on very quickly. Again, that is not a time to be outside. Very serious weather. The backside of Hurricane Hugo will then come across and smack us yet one more time.
We got knocked off the air shortly after that, but our crews were out in the storm.
Right now it is 10 o'clock on the battery. Hurricane Hugo is just 2 hours away, and the rain is stinging all of our faces. We really shouldn't even be out here.
That's great. Yeah, why are you out here? Why not? They got nothing better to do. The lights out at the house.
10 o'clock Thursday night. Tropical storm force winds become hurricane force winds, and Hugo begins to cut his deadly path through the low country. Winds rip through the area. Electrical power tries to hang on, but eventually fails.
Power is out now in much of North Charleston with the eye of Hurricane Hugo due in about an hour. The rain and the wind have become more and more severe.
But then, total calm, and guests at a North Charleston motel peer out directly into the eye of Hurricane Hugo.
I didn't really believe it was going to be this calm. It's really neat. Just like it just stopped, dead. It was wild. This is eerie, really eerie, knowing that possibly the worst of it's still yet to come.
I hate to see the rest of it. It was like the first part.
The guests used the few precious minutes of the eye's calm to collect metal that Hugo ripped from the motel's overhangs.
So the wind is starting to pick up now. The eye is passing over North Charleston. People are getting back in their rooms and getting ready for round 2 of Hurricane Hugo. Gary Ross, TV2 Action News, North Charleston.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Ashley for TV2 Action News. It is 6:45 early Friday morning, September 22nd. Day 1 after Hurricane Hugo, as the cleanup and the restorations of our home begin.
By Friday daybreak, we were back on the air, and our crews fanned out in several directions recording the damage. We were shocked by what we found.
At about 10 o'clock last night, Myrtle Beach was considered the most likely spot for Hurricane Hugo to come ashore, and it certainly looked the part. 60-mile-per-hour winds were already whipping the streets, and Hurricane Hugo was moving slowly northward up the coast, but still some local beachfront residents decided to ride it out.
It was terrifying. It was, it's just hard to explain unless you were here. The wind, the force, the not knowing, the uncertainty. We felt like the worst was over when it finally touched down.
But by the early morning hours, the worst was over. Clearly, there'd been some major damage done on the Grand Strand, but only daylight would tell us just how much.
But morning brought relatively good news. Yes, there was millions of dollars of damage to beachfront property, but it could have been much, much worse. Myrtle Beach did get winds upwards of 100 miles per hour, but it did not get the 17-foot tidal surge that hit further south.
Get your stuff and you're going to go with one of the pavilion drivers, okay? All right.
This morning, the South Carolina National Guard was sent in to secure the downtown area until all live wires and other debris had been cleared from the streets. The area is expected to be without electricity for at least another 24 hours. In Myrtle Beach, Ren Scott, TV2 Action News.
Hurricane Hugo ravaged Mount Pleasant's pricey Sneef Farms development. Winds of up to 130 miles an hour whipped through every neighborhood. And while most of the houses withstood the storm, wind laid waste to yards and streets everywhere. Many of the residents of Sneef Farm were proud of their tree-lined streets, but now they're paying an unexpected price for the scenery. Joe Maupin's front yard was once one of the best kept in the neighborhood. Today, he climbed over tree limbs to get inside a home, which was also invaded by a fallen tree limb.
Well, I got, a hole in the roof that's come down through the attic and into the second floor. And then, of course, outside, where there were 200 trees, there are probably 25 left.
Buzzsaws are the rallying cry as neighbors help each other clear the trees from the roads and from the roofs.
No, y'all getting it, not me.
A large oak tree crashed through Barbara Francis' roof. Rain, insulation, and roofing followed.
And water came in later. It sounded like a little waterfall coming in. And it hit his room, it hit the playroom, and it hit this room. And this room looks the worst.
Many of the houses in Sneef Farms are not only more expensive than elsewhere, but better built. They held up well despite being close to the eye of the storm. Up the road near Awendaw, tin shacks collapsed into worthless debris. Speculation is that 3 out of 4 trees in the area have been knocked down, and lumber companies are expected to help with the cleanup. Meanwhile, on Sneef Farm, cleanup has begun, and most of the neighbors tonight are not trying to count the trees, just their blessings. St. Brian, TV2 Action News, Mount Pleasant.
By early this morning, it was obvious this was not the city that we had left behind. Debris and glass is strewn all up and down King Street in downtown Charleston, and police are fighting off looters. The city marina has displaced itself with large vessels in the street and in somebody's front yard. Even a barge has come a-calling. People who remained in the city took to higher ground.
So we took about 1.5 foot of water through the whole downstairs. Right now it's about 1/2 inch deep in mud down there. But it all settled. All the sewers start backing up.
We watched out of the window up there and we saw the shed pick up and move over the top. This is a 10-foot hedge that was on the side of it, and it went over the top of that. And then we heard loud noises, and we never saw the tree go down. It was just all of a sudden one big loud noise.
Along Charleston's Battery, there was about 6 inches of water, much less than originally expected. Charleston's historic homes along the Battery remained true and steadfast. Charleston's White Point's garden did not. Trees along the Battery Park were chopped to bits by Hugo. The holy city looks as though it has been scorned, with churches some of the city's saddest sight. This renovation project is now hopeless. But as bad as it may seem, the situation is not. Where there are people, there is hope, and most of the people were able to get out in time.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. I think we want to head back to Awendaw, where we're transmitting from. This is our backup TV2. Our studios, as we mentioned, sustaining some damage from Hurricane Hugo as well, so we won't be able to broadcast from our regular studios, but we are continuing to broadcast and staying on the air from Awendaw, our transmitter site, and that's where Dan Ashley and a host of TV2 personnel are located right now. Dan, back to you.
Thank you, Rob. And Leslie, as you mentioned, our transmitter facility here in Awendaw has done us well. We had a team of crack engineers who absolutely broke their backs all night long to keep us on the air. We did get kicked off for a while, but they were able to get us back on first thing in the morning. They've done a fantastic job.
Hugo had torn off part of our roof and ruined some editing equipment at the station. If you saw our 6 and 11 o'clock newscast on Friday, you saw Terry Casey anchoring outside of the National Weather Service, a temporary broadcast site.
Back to our hurricane coverage, taking you now to North Charleston. It certainly didn't escape the wrath of Hugo when he hit, and what seemed to be a forest of trees was cut down by Hugo's winds. Trees and power lines crisscrossed streets and highways. Roofs and paneling were ripped from more homes and other buildings than really you could count. It was staggering just to drive, for example, down Rivers Avenue, which we did last night, or rather early this morning, and it still is staggering, even in the daylight. Crews are going to be back on the streets tomorrow morning at first light to resume their cleanup efforts.
But by Saturday, we were back in our studios. Not exactly like normal, but with an effective new tool. Eagle Sky 2 was sending back live helicopter pictures that gave some their first look at the Isle of Palms and at Sullivan's Island. Anyone trying to go to the Isle of Palms or Sullivan's Island by boat is now subject to arrest as well. There will be absolutely no access to those areas. They are now under martial law.
Which leaves many of you, I'm sure, starving for information about what happened to your homes, what may have happened to your property on the Sullivan's Island or the Isle of Palms. And we are going to give you a first-hand look right now as we go live to Judd Chapin. You see him flying
Leslie and
Eagle
Terry,
2.
I can't hear you up here, but I'll tell you what we're going to show you. We're looking out the window right now. This is the northern end of Sullivan's Island. We're going to be traveling north up the coastline across Sullivan's and Isle of Palms. You can see the devastation out here. Every single house has been affected some way or another. people who are watching are wondering what has happened, they can see. Storm surge has moved and wind has moved the structures from along this street right here is right on the coastline. It's moved everything back all the way across into the intercoastal waterway. We're crossing the bridge between Sullivan's and Isle of Palms at this time. There are entire blocks out here. They're just missing the houses there. You can see the foundations, but the buildings are gone. A lot of the houses on the southern end here of Isle of Palms that we're coming up to, which originally we thought had been washed away, are new construction. There weren't were not any homes here. A lot of wind damage to the roofs. The bottom floors have been knocked away. Tremendous amount of debris still blocking the streets. No one is out here moving up and down now. Apparently, they have gotten the rest of the residents off the island. We've only seen a couple of police cars, emergency vehicles, and National Guard Jeep moving up and down. Not much movement. It's very quiet. They have made some progress today in cleaning off some of these streets, getting the power lines out of the way, and so forth.
When we come back, more on the aftermath of Hugo. As the Low Country rebuilds, stories of despair and stories of hope.
Remember Thanksgiving dinners at Grandma's. Cool autumn days making warm apple butter. The smell of homemade peach pies spicing the air. Isn't it nice to know that you can still find all the little things that help turn moments into memories all over again at Foodland?
I don't have to tell you that Hurricane Hugo was a disaster. 75% of SCE&G's system was destroyed. We normally have 300 crew personnel in the Charleston area, but after Hugo we brought in 2,500 outside utility personnel, all working 16-hour days. With this help, what we thought would take 4 weeks to rebuild was accomplished in just 17 days. But most of all, we want to thank you, our customers, for working with us, being supportive and patient.
Hurricane Hugo, Wrath to Restoration will continue in a moment. The Low Country will never forget the power of Hurricane Hugo. If you'd like a VHS copy of WCBD TV2's program, Hurricane Hugo, Wrath to Restoration, send a check or money order in the amount of $14.95 to the TV2 Disaster Relief Fund, in care of WCBD TV2, Post Office Box 879, Charleston, South Carolina 29402. Please allow 3 to 4 weeks for delivery. All proceeds will be donated to the Low Country Disaster Relief Fund.
Battered but not beaten. That's our new motto at all Gene Reed dealerships. We, like you, felt the full wrath of Hugo, but thank God we're all alive and well. Now's the time to rebuild and to help others less fortunate than you and I. To help, we started a Battered but not beaten fund for the homeless with an initial contribution from our dealerships. If you can help, send your contribution to the Salvation Army Battered but Not Beaten Fund. If we can help you with any of your automotive needs, come see us at Gene Reed Chevrolet, Mitsubishi, Suzuki, or Gene Reed Toyota. Thank you.
I got nothing in there left. I'm staying with somebody else. No place to sleep, nothing, eat nothing. Just gone.
Now, of course, the vital link, as you well know, between Sullivan's Island and the Isle of Palms is something called the Ben Sawyer Bridge.
Yes, but right now the Ben Sawyer Bridge is at an angle like this. It is completely unattached and has been swinging in the wind. Now it's just standing upright, and highway officials are trying to get it fixed in some way, sometime. And our TV2 St. Brian is standing by live on the Mount Pleasant side of that bridge. Saint, what are the latest details on when that bridge might be fixed?
Well, Terry, Leslie, first of all, let me tell you that this bridge, of course, is completely impassable. I took a walk to the edge just a few minutes ago, and as someone who crosses this bridge almost day in and day out, it's really a tragic sight. Isle of Palms Mayor, this is the latest, Isle of Palms Mayor Carmen Bunch has asked Governor Carol Campbell for a makeshift bridge to help people cross, but highway officials say they really can't give an estimate as to when any kind of makeshift bridge or pontoon would be able to connect the islands with Mount Pleasant. Now, earlier today, we toured this bridge from Chopper. Let's go to those pictures and we can show you what it looks like from high in the sky. Hurricane Hugo whipped the bridge every which way but loose. The concrete below the gear shift has cracked. Highway officials have estimated it will take 5 to 7 days before they really can start work on the bridge. The idea would be to lift up and secure one side of it, try to put it back in place. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers would have to then monitor any of the traffic crossing just to make sure that the bridge is safe. And, of course, if you're trying to get to the bridge at this point, the thing to do is to, you're not going to be able to get across, of course. If you want any information on what's going on in Sullivan's Island or on the Isle of Palms, the idea would be to go to the Mount Pleasant Holiday Inn on Route 17. They have liaison officials there who have toured the island. Maybe they can help you out with the property. But right now, there's just no getting across. And, of course, if you do get across, even by boat, you'd be arrested. So just don't even think about trying to cross into Sullivan's Island or Isle of Palms.
We're circling an area near Island. One of the problems that these people have out here is that they have so much damage from tree limbs and tops of trees and whole trees falling on everything. They have no power. Normally this time of night you'd see lights scattered all over out here, and now it's going to be dark. They don't have the word. They've asked that people not burn in this area because there's not enough water pressure or water to fight any fires if they got out of control. So people like this down here have no way of knowing not to do what they're doing, to burn their trash and rubble. The destruction in this area, I think, is as bad or worse than any place I've seen anywhere along the coast. There is a whole community here coming up on our left front as we pass over it that is almost every house has been destroyed. It's like nothing I've ever seen. It's almost like a war, I guess you could say. Just everything in his path is gone, destroyed. There are people in this area. They're allowed in here, but it's not like the Isle of Palms. They've been in this area all day cleaning up. This is the area I was speaking about earlier where the older gentleman rode out the storm, said he would never, ever do that again. You can see this destruction out to our left now as we come across. It's absolute, total destruction of everything out here. Some of these were 2- and 3-story homes on stilts. They just disappeared. All you see is rubble, a few foundations, empty swimming pools. Most all of the work that's being done out here by people trying to clean up will come to a halt here shortly as it gets dark. They will not be able to see. And last night when we were out here, it was just pitch black. You couldn't see probably 10 feet. It looks like it'll be the same way tonight, even though the skies are clearing and we've got a beautiful sunset to the west. And that's it from our end up here, Terry, Leslie. We'll take it back to you now.
Yeah, today the Reverend Jesse Jackson came to Charleston because of our tragedy and devastation here. He is trying, of course, just to spread a little hope to the people of Charleston and the outlying areas. TV2's Angela Brown has details.
The fury of Hurricane Hugo is over, but its destruction has crippled all of Charleston and surrounding areas. The damage is so great, many people wonder if their neighborhoods will ever be the same. But today, the Reverend Jesse Jackson paid a visit for personal and motivational reasons.
I have friends and relatives here. I'm from South Carolina, and so I am concerned. I'm delighted that in the face of all of this tragedy and pain and loss of property, that human lives have been saved.
These are some of the neighborhoods Reverend Jackson visited. Jackson says he is stunned by all the damage, but says it's now time to rebuild. He's encouraging people to do just that.
Many of the young people who are unemployed and unskilled should really have a chance now to learn to become roofers and brick masons and plasterers and painters and help rebuild a new Charleston.
Jackson says when he gets back to Washington, the Rainbow Coalition will work to bring food and other necessities to damaged areas. He says he will also fight to get aid for Charleston.
The storm turning trees into toothpicks and uprooting houses and cranes is just an amazing and awesome display of God's power when he speaks. On the other hand, I think about how many people are standing in food lines But thank God food is at the end of the line. You could be standing in line at the funeral home watching the remains of a loved one.
So tonight, many people in Charleston have a little more hope, which makes it easier to put their lives and their homes back in order.
I need water, I need cold water, I need food, my baby need Pampers. We can live here.
Early this morning, people began forming long lines wrapping around the Sam's Wholesale in North Charleston, hoping for a chance just to buy the bare necessities.
Some candles, breads, maybe some matches and stuff that we're going to need for the rest of the week until the light comes back on.
And while Sam's was selling at cost, others were not.
About $1,000 just for one generator on gas.
And how much can you usually sell them for?
$200.
Other profit makers seemed in poor taste.
This shirt cost $13. I got a Ramada Inn. A guy made him, I think, Friday night. He was from Atlanta.
But not everyone was trying to make a profit. When a cup of coffee was like a cup of gold this morning, these ladies were giving it away for free.
We've been pouring coffee since 6 o'clock yesterday. We got a generator, and that's all we can offer.
What my daughter said, Sherman couldn't destroy Charleston, and neither could Hugo.
Other luxuries are long gone. Generators are being sent from Savannah to get this gas station pumping again. Wishful motorists began lining up at 7 o'clock this morning.
Trying to get some gas. I lost my whole home. I lost everything.
By noontime, tempers were flaring.
The station is right there. We have the gas, right? The generators are there. Why can't we get somebody to open the station so we can get people moving and stuff like that? Why have them wait here for 4 hours?
And the situation is only going to get more frustrating until safe drinking water and power are restored. But judging by the looks of the South Carolina Electric and Gas building, it could be a long wait. Leslie Lyles, TV2, Action News, North Charleston.
In the wake of Hurricane Hugo, this section of Awendaw resembled a war zone. Falling very close to the eye of the storm, the area was hit with a 12-foot tidal surge, turning dozens of homes into piles of wood. Residents Kim and David Hendricks say they were apprehensive about evacuating, but today they surveyed the damage and thank God that they did.
And I thought maybe the trailer would be tipped over, or maybe sideways or bent up, but I never imagined that it would just be gone.
Everything gone. Said the water was like 10 or 12 feet here and just some pluff mud everywhere and all our stuff, and we're just digging through. Have no hope to find it all.
But as bad as Awendaw was hit, the barrier islands may have been hit even worse. It could be weeks or even months before the damage is sorted out on Sullivan's Island in Isle of Palms.
Isle of Palms was ground zero for Hugo. Winds gusting up to 140 miles per hour turned up a 17-foot tidal surge that pounded island homes throughout the night. Perhaps the most vivid example of Hugo's strength was its destruction of Yacht Harbor. More than 50 expensive yachts were torn from their moorings and tossed around like toys. It had earlier been reported that the front row of beach homes had been destroyed and washed out to sea. Our trip today found those houses damaged, but still on land and certainly not destroyed. Martial law remains in force on the island, and National Guardsmen are expected to remain on the beach for the next several days. Earlier reports had Sullivan's Island faring better than the Isle of Palms, but this aerial view makes that quite hard to believe. Today, city officials reported that 95% of the island had been destroyed, and martial law has been declared there as well. It's striking how arbitrary Hugo was with this island. A house perfectly intact stands next to a house completely destroyed. Overall, the south end of the island appears to have weathered the storm better than the north, but signs of destruction are apparent from end to end. With the Ben Sawyer Bridge still completely out of commission, it will probably be several weeks before residents are able to return. Residents are warned not to try and travel to the island by boat. They will be turned away by National Guardsmen on the shore. Perhaps the biggest surprise of the barrier islands is Folly Beach. Long known for erosion problems, many oceanfront homes seem to have weathered the storm quite well. But there are dozens of signs of Hugo's fury, including the landmark Atlantic restaurant, now nothing but pilings in the sea. Like all island residents, the residents of Folly Beach still have plenty of work ahead of them, but they can take comfort in the fact that many expected this island to get hit much worse. Flying in Eagle Sky 2, this is Ren Scott, TV2, Action News.
We have snakes. You know what? Snakes have left their habitat. Yes, are you going to go with shoes or boots?
No, ma'am. I don't want to go.
Okay, well, that's what I'm telling you. We're trying to clear that so you all could get there and be safe.
Isle of Palms Mayor Carmen Bunch set the record straight this evening. No residents will be allowed on the island until Monday.
Bunch declared martial law after Hurricane Hugo blasted the island and destroyed many of the homes. But residents want to see their property now.
Martial law is one thing, but my God, these people are just trying to find out what's going on at their homes. That's all they want to do. Let them go, check in, show proof of residency, and walk to their homes and look at it and leave. That's all we want.
This martial law thing now is going a little far. And there's a way that you can manage it manageably without running 8 or 10 people over in a ferry and dropping them off in a van.
Bunch says she'll ferry the residents to the island on Monday or Tuesday of next week. They'll be taken to their houses by a Wild Dunes van. Bunch says just getting around the island is a problem.
Mike Tinky has called me. He's having a crew come to clear the way. All the beautiful trees in Wild Dunes are over the road. We have to clear the trees out to get to the homes.
The Isle of Palms police say they arrested 3 people today for looting and are using their shotguns to show they mean business.
At this point, we're going to take you downtown because you have to understand there's a curfew downtown as well, and a lot of people haven't been able to get back to their offices or down to the Battery. So this is just an aerial view of downtown, and as you can see, again, rooftop damage is the order of the day. Everybody got hit. Some of the homes, the larger homes down in the Battery, held up pretty well, but as you get back with some of the old Charleston homes, they really took a beating. And again, you need to know that there's a 6 p.m. curfew downtown. They do not want you downtown. Your storefronts and houses are being protected by the National Guard to keep looters from coming in there. But there's no need to get down there. You have no electricity, and there is no gas, and all the things you need to work on your home. So let them get the area in order before you go down there. And as you can see, as bad as the storm was, good old historic Charleston stood up quite well. It's not the first hurricane that this area has seen.
Only 24 houses completely collapsed. Now, one man was killed when his house collapsed on Council Street, but that is the only death we have confirmed downtown so far.
By Sunday, a few things were very clear, tragically clear. It would take weeks at best to restore power to everyone. Food, water, and ice were hot commodities to most, and some people were just thankful it was Sunday.
Holy, holy, holy. Voices rang through First Scots Presbyterian Church this morning. The congregation sang of praise and thanks despite the destruction Hurricane Hugo had done to many of their homes. When the storm had cleared, many realized they had lost everything except their faith.
Our history is that of a hardy people who have withstood earthquake and war, fire and storm. Increase our faith that today, relying on you, we can become examples to our descendants of what it means to be committed disciples in the face of destruction.
The mood at this church was calm but grew emotional as they continued their service of prayer and song. One of the messages being delivered compared Charlestonians with the disciples who weathered the storm on the Sea of Galilee.
They were blinded, for they could not see where they were going, just as we could not see what was happening outside during the storm, but they were blinded to the power and presence of Jesus Christ during the midst of the storm. Yes.
And as they continued to pray, the congregation was reminded by their minister that this time they are the victims, but that all things are healed through God and time. The ministers of First Scots Presbyterian Church hope now their congregation has the strength and encouragement to go back to their communities and continue rebuilding their homes and their lives. Angela Brown, TV2 Action News, Charleston.
Perhaps the most striking view of Hurricane Hugo's destruction comes from up in the air.
It does. Eagle Sky 2 helicopter pilot Judd Chapin joins us now for an aerial look at the damage of the McClellanville area. Judd?
Terry, Leslie, we're right over the intercoastal waterway coming into the town of McClellanville. It's really hard to imagine, I guess, unless you sat through this thing, how forceful this wall of water was that came through this town. The backsurge itself must have been tremendous. There are cars and trucks just out our left door that are sitting in the edge of the waterway, the river here, that have been sucked back in. No telling how much debris and stuff is clogging these channels. We're coming now over the town itself. A lot of the houses are still intact. Look, a lot better shape than some of the ones down toward Awada and some out on the islands. At least these people are fortunate enough that most of their homes are still here. But the water had to have been all the way up through the first floor, if not into the second floor. A lot of the trees are down in this area like all the rest of the area. just a tremendous amount of damage. We'll let you take a look here a minute as we cruise by. And we're coming up on the west side of the town near the shrimp docks. These people's main livelihood up here is fishing, shrimping, and so forth. Their homes are not only touched, but also their businesses. There's a house coming up here across the river, you'll see. This is on the south side of the river from the town itself. These folks now have about a half dozen or better new residents in their backyard, all fishing boats. These are not small boats either. These are full-size ocean-going shrimpers that are sitting up next to these houses. As we move back down the channel toward the intercoastal, you'll see their fuel barges, their workshops, everything has been destroyed. A number of boats are sunk, capsized, and a great many of them are high and dry on land. One of the problems they're going to have here once they get through the cleanup is the ecological effect it's going to have on this area. A tremendous amount of oil and fuel has gone from these ruptured boats. There was a large fuel storage tank here that's ruptured. All of that has gone into the intercoastal and out into the wildlife sanctuary here offshore.
All right, well, you know, a lot of people have been working, as you heard, and as you hopefully know by now. One of those who has been doing an excellent job up to and during the hurricane is in the Charleston area, but he doesn't live here. He makes his home down south in the southern part of Florida. His name is Robert Sheets. He is director of the National Hurricane Center, and he is with?
He is with our own Dan Ashley, and they are downtown. They are not at our weather center. They're downtown. Dan, what is Mr. Sheets doing downtown?
Well, we're going to ask him and find out, Leslie. We were standing down here getting ready to do another live report, and who should walk by but Dr. Bob Sheets of the National Hurricane Center. Tell us first what you're doing here, Bob.
Well, of course, we were looking to see the damage itself, doing a little bit of survey, see how high the storm surge came up, and here I came in this area, and some nice lady let me stay there last night, and I'm going to stay there tonight, I think, unless they throw me out.
What is your sense of the damage that you've seen here?
In the Charleston area, I think that it's not unexpected. Not unexpected at all, the degree of damage here as compared to out on the barrier islands. We've seen here on Sullivan Island and, of course, on Isle of Pines and up in the Wild Dunes area that I think it was more than I expected. I flew across that area yesterday. We did a whole survey across there yesterday morning, and from the air, it didn't look as bad as it does from the ground.
That's what other people have told me as well. Now, you said, obviously, you've seen many a hurricane. The damage from this one, you say, is impressive, given the others.
No question about it. I've looked in the wake of Hurricanes Frederick and Anita and Elena, and we've done similar surveys, and I think over area-wide that this is more damage. Now, some others I've seen it where on the barrier islands they've swept it clean and there was sand. Now, here most of the houses, or many of the houses, structures are still there, and I think that's what fooled us from the air, because you get down below and you find out there's a lot of damage in those houses.
All right. Are you still studying Hurricane Hugo, what we really felt here? Are you still reviewing the information?
Right. We'll put it all together. One of the key things in our program is what we call the slosh model, the storm surge model, and that was the key that was used for the evacuation process here in the Charleston area. And so we now go back and make sure that the model did it right, and I think it did pretty well. I think the one thing we have found here, and we knew that at the time, was we're lucky. If we really look at this hurricane and see what it could have done had it been 20 miles farther south, and then Charleston would have been in the core of the problem. As we went up the inland waterway here today, and you go by the Isle of Pines and up onto the Wild Dunes area, and you see the tremendous rise in the storm surge. Just down here, it's around 7 to 8 feet is my best estimate right now. But down there, it just rises up to it's probably 15 or a little bit higher than that. And if you get over in the wildlife area over there, I suspect somewhere around 20. So shift it 20 miles, and you got a big problem right here.
Okay. Dr. Sheets, thank you very much. A nice surprise to see you here. I know you'll be in town for a couple of days evaluating what has happened here. Thank you very much, Dr. Sheets. Well, we'll go back to you, a surprise visitor, someone we talked to long before Hugo hit, and he's here with us now again. Terry and Leslie.
Meantime, Ren Scott yesterday took an aerial tour of damage around the barrier islands in Charleston County. You went to a different place today, didn't you?
Yeah, well, yesterday we were out in the barrier islands. We're on Folly Island, Sullivan's Island, Isle of Palms. And the idea is we can get up in the air in our helicopter and see and show people what they can't see. Today we took a little different turn. Today we went out and picked up, just Judge Chapin showed you a little earlier what was happening in McClellanville. I'm going to pick it up just a little bit south of McClellanville and show you that the extent of the damage goes all the way down the coast. And what we're going to do here, this is an area right around McClellanville, just south of McClellanville. And what you can see here is all this debris was picked up in the Bulls Bay area and just brought all the way inland, probably about 200 or 300 yards across the way, all the way down the coast. And we're going to stay with this for a while and just show you the extent of the damage. All this stuff strewn about. These formerly were homes. This is just not trash thrown about. These are, you can't really tell where the homes were and where the debris is just strewn, but it's like this for miles and miles and miles down the coast. And if you look at some of the objects you see there, there's a refrigerator. Coming up here, you're going to see a Mercedes-Benz nose down. You can only really imagine the force of the storm. And one of the reasons we're putting this on the air and doing it as often as possible is so people can understand just how devastated some of the other families are. There are a lot of very fortunate people in the Low Country, and these people really need help out in this area. Of all the areas we've seen from the air, this is clearly the most heaviest hit. These people are trying to put together, that was actually a house right behind this woman. In a minute, you're going to see their clothes were blown from their bayfront homes up into the trees. This is about 200 or 300 yards from the water, and these people are literally going back and trying to pull things out. Pelicans are just starting to come out. The force of the storm blew them back several hundred yards into the marsh, and we went back there. If you try to take a picture of them, they hiss at you and come after you, so we didn't dare do that. We've got enough troubles right now, but this was the first one we saw kind of emerge, and I guess it's a sign of things slowly getting back to normal. I'm just going to let this roll for a while, because one thing that people keep asking us when we fly and land in areas is how bad is the tree damage, and is it as bad in other parts of the Low Country as it is right here? As you can see, Terry and Leslie, it is just devastating. There's an estimated 3/4 of the trees in certain areas are just down, and you know, if you look at these pictures, there's no doubt about it. They've just been wiped out. Some of these houses did stand up pretty well to the storm, but again, you'll go right next door and somebody is completely leveled. And we've just been flying around in awe, looking down at this area, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. There you can see how close they are to the water, and there was a storm surge of somewhere from 12 to 17 feet. It came all the way across, covered this whole area, kept it underwater, and reached up to Highway 17, they tell me. We have not had a chance to get up to the people who were 3 or 4 miles inland to see how they fared, but you can see the people on the coast did not fare too well. The good news is most of these people were well aware of where they were living and did evacuate. This is an interesting shot. We're coming back towards Charleston, south of McClellanville now, and I don't know where this little house came from because there's nothing in the area. Again, it just shows the tremendous force of the storm. We're going to come around the point here and come into the Bay Area, and this is Hobcaw Point. Again, no area was spared. You can see a lot of tree damage. What you cannot see here is a lot of water damage. Obviously, they're very close to the water, and everybody was flooded there, but you can see the houses on a relative scale did pretty well. Now, this is an interesting thing. If anybody's looking for the Spirit of Charleston tour this weekend, we found it. It is up the Cooper River about 3 or 4 miles north of the Navy base. I don't know how it got there. We haven't been able to contact authorities, but I imagine they brought it upriver to try to moor it, and it broke away from its mooring. And as we were heading up towards the Goose Creek Monk's Corner area, we just came by it and thought we'd put it on the air. All around the Bay Area, you'll see Coast Guard trips like this. These folks are searching for, hopefully, survivors. There are a lot of areas where bodies have been spotted. They're not confirmed sightings. People have called and said, we've seen this and we've seen that, and we think it could be somebody floating. So the Coast Guard is certainly out there looking. This is the chicken farm run by the monks up at Mepkin Abbey. They have about 45,000 chickens there, which they will have to send to slaughter tomorrow because their housing is gone. These are chickens that they keep for usually a year at a time. They're egg-laying chickens, but they will now go to slaughter and become chicken soup as of tomorrow. We're going to move up to Goose Creek a little bit, and again, you can see this area did quite well on a relative scale. Again, a lot of tree damage. but you don't have the water damage that they had closer to the coastal areas. But again, no one was spared, and everybody is, I don't mean to belittle any part of the Low Country, because everybody has their own struggle, and indeed the people in Goose Creek have theirs as well. But it was not quite as bad as we saw certainly in the McClellanville area. And pretty soon we're going to take you to what is called the Medway Plantation. We flew out there today because we found that there were about a dozen people trapped in this plantation. They are about 15 miles off any roadway, and there are so many trees down in the various roadways getting out of there that they cannot leave the area. Luckily, they're well stocked with food, but as you can see, they had very heavy wind and tree damage, and just like everybody else, they are digging out. So I hope that helps people get a little insight into the damage around the area. Again, we're just trying to get up and let you get a view of what we've been able to see. It was a tremendous storm, and maybe you can see your home there, or you can see someone else's home and maybe find out if they're okay or report back.
Yeah, it's tough to find words to accurately describe the awe that you said.
You can't. You can just look at it and just say, I hope everybody got out. I hope that they got out.
And one thing I can say, we've been flying around the different areas, and every time we see something that looks very serious, we land, and knock on wood, so far, every time we've landed, we've had good news. People evacuated. They're coming back to the destruction, but they're alive and well, so we got a lot to be thankful for.
While many people were worried about just surviving the storm, there were some doctors and nurses working to bring new life into the Low Country.
Meet baby Hugo. That's the nickname of newborn Jonathan Fuller, born in the eye of Hurricane Hugo at St. Francis Hospital in Charleston.
I was so scared. I didn't know which to be more worried about, what was happening inside my wife or what was happening outside the building.
But at least I'll have a birthday to remember.
It's a day the people at the medical university will never forget either. MUSC President James Edwards toured the neonatal unit this afternoon.
We were as prepared as anyone could be. I've never seen such courage and performance in the face of personal danger as I saw the other night.
When the storm hit, 191 patients were moved into the corridors. The hospital expects to have power back on tonight, but supplies are still limited.
We've had people ask for formula to take home with their babies, and we've just had to tell them we don't have that capability to give them formula. So we're asking the moms to try to breastfeed if at all possible.
Area hospitals say they're only limited to helping out in emergency care situations. That means you have to be extra careful when driving, for instance, through stoplights that are down. Medical personnel are worried people cleaning up will strain themselves, that those unfamiliar with chainsaws will cut themselves. But overall, hospitals say they are coping better than anticipated and expect to resume semi-normal operating status by Monday. St. Brian, TV2 Action News, Charleston.
In the next hour, we will look at some of the issues that develop in the aftermath of Hugo, the future of beach development, and the handling of disaster aid by the government.
Battered but not beaten. That's our new motto at all Gene Reed dealerships. We, like you, felt the full wrath of Hugo, but thank God we're all alive and well. Now's the time to rebuild and to help others less fortunate than you and I. To help, we started a Battered but Not Beaten fund for the homeless with an initial contribution from our dealerships. If you can help, send your contribution to the Salvation Army Battered but Not Beaten Fund. If we can help you with any of your automotive needs, come see us at Gene Reed Chevrolet, Mitsubishi, Suzuki, or Gene Reed Toyota. Thank you.
Remember Thanksgiving dinners at Grandma's. Cool autumn days making warm apple butter. The smell of homemade peach pies spicing the air. Isn't it nice to know that you can still find all the little things that help turn moments into memories all over again at Foodland?
Hurricane Hugo, wrath to restoration, will continue in a moment. This is a TV2 Action News Brief.
I'm Bill Baird. It'll be a chilly night of high school football, but the Channel 2 cameras will be there and we'll have highlights.
I'm Margaret Morris, and you may want to bundle up if you're going out tonight. I'll have your chilly forecast.
I'm Leslie Lyles. We'll tell you how all this cold is going to affect those left homeless by Hugo.
And I'm Dan Ashley. We'll also tell you about medical heroes from Hugo tonight.
I don't have to tell you that Hurricane Hugo was a disaster. 75% of SCE&G's system was destroyed. We normally have 300 crew personnel in the Charleston area. But after Hugo, we brought in 2,500 outside utility personnel, all working 16-hour days. With this help, what we thought would take 4 weeks to rebuild was accomplished in just 17 days. But most of all, we want to thank you, our customers, for working with us, being supportive and patient.
Fifth businessman down here that has a business wants to check on his business. Nobody is allowed them. It's right here. Your bakery is fine. Okay, Somebody else just checked on it, a matter of fact.
Oh, a man?
Yeah, one of your partners.
My partner, probably. Good.
It didn't even get a scratch on it.
That's good.
More than 100 looters were arrested in the week after the storm in Charleston and in neighboring counties, but the problem never really got out of hand. The curfew and what amounted to martial law were strictly enforced by the National Guard, SLED officers, the State Highway Patrol, and of course local police agencies.
Can we get home?
Yes, sir. Just want to advise you that the city police have established a curfew.
I heard it on the radio, but
they'll be enforcing it throughout the...
Downtown Charleston looks even more like a war zone tonight. Hundreds of National Guard troops in fatigues are out enforcing the 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. curfew. These guardsmen at Meeting and Calhoun streets are questioning motorists, asking to see driver's licenses. This man was returning to his downtown Charleston home for the first time since Hurricane Hugo hit. Do you know about this curfew?
I just heard about it. I've heard about it. We hadn't had, actually when I heard about it, I was in Goose Creek, and it's too late to turn back. We're exhausted and just need to get home and try to get in bed.
The National Guard has deployed its troops throughout the Low Country as far down as Hilton Head. National Guard Brigadier General Frank Jones says they're out to assist local authorities and enforce the curfew.
We're hoping those patrols will provide safety for the people. It will help them to protect what they have against anybody that wants to come in and try to loot or etc.
None of us have ever seen this type of widespread destruction before, unless, of course, it was during wartime. And it was this type of devastation that brought about the need for the National Guard. Army choppers began circling the Citadel Military College early this morning. On the ground, National Guardsmen unloaded vans full of supplies and harnessed small jeeps underneath Black Hawk helicopters. From the air, it was obvious why the National Guard was called in. On the ground, the situation looked even worse. The Isle of Palms is devastated by Hugo. Every other building appears to be seriously damaged. Many are completely destroyed. But many Isle of Palms residents are furious about the National Guard's presence and their orders to keep residents from checking their property.
A number of people have been very roughly treated and threatened with rifles and had a gun pointed at them and told that they must get off right now. And, you know, people live here aren't accustomed to that sort of. People have been arrested that are not criminals.
People are saying you all have fired shots.
I don't know. That's a bunch of rumors. No, shots been fired yet.
Some shots might have been fired, but not by National Guard. I can't say as far as the civilian authorities, but National Guard have not fired.
This T-shirt shop is a good example of why the National Guard is here. Obviously, looting would be quite simple, and there's plenty of danger in this building as well. When Isle of Palms residents do get back home, it is certain that they will be shocked by what they see or by what they don't see.
Well, you are a criminal now. You just broke martial law.
What's your current address?
You know what martial law is? I wasn't born yesterday, and I probably have more education than you have. So. Yeah.
The barrier islands were the first to evacuate, and Folly Beach, which has had a critical erosion problem, was a prime target for Hugo. Damage was heavy at some Folly Beach homes from the storm surge. Remember the Atlantic House restaurant? Take a look. This is one day before Hugo. This is what's left. A stack of boards, a few pilings, and now a new home for a pelican. Closer to the eye of the storm and harder hit were Sullivan's Island and the Isle of Palms. The storm surge and several tornadoes, along with 135-mile-an-hour winds, shredded some homes, moved others, and mysteriously barely touched still others. But it was the residents and the homeowners on the two islands that created the biggest storm afterward. The Ben Sawyer Bridge, the only span to the island, had been sent spinning like a top by Hugo's winds, only to end up off track and tilted to the sky. It was a bizarre but effective roadblock. Residents were unable to get back to their homes, and as the days passed, they became more frustrated and more angry.
With a sign saying information for Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palm so the people can go somewhere and get this information and know what? I didn't say here, I said over there where people are going.
Residents from the Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island are angry, confused, and full of questions. They want to know when they will be allowed to go back to the island to get a first-hand look at the damage. This is all they've been able to see so far. Aerial shots of what used to be a sprawling beachfront community. A curfew's been in effect since Hugo barreled through the area, and that hasn't stopped some residents from sneaking onto the island.
Well, I drove in yesterday morning early from Columbia, not knowing that there was martial law in effect. I had two friends of mine drive me from behind Simmons Seafood, through the bay to the waterway, past Tollers, into the backside of the island around Station 12. I was dropped off at the dock. They proceeded on to Isle of Palms. Again, we didn't know martial law was in effect.
Late this morning, an agreement was reached to allow some officials to go to the beaches.
Marge Swanson, another council person, and I go into the island to talk to the mayor to try to organize an orderly process for the people to get back to the island, to check their property and start cleanup processes this afternoon.
And that trip was made without the Isle of Palms police chief, who quit during a dispute with Mayor Carmen Bunch.
She put the entire police department's lives in jeopardy by ordering them to stay on the island during a Category 4 hurricane. I told her it was unsafe. I told her I disagreed. She ordered us to stay, and it was only at the last minute when I countermanded her orders and ordered my men to leave against her orders.
I stick with the people to the very end, and I was one of the last to leave here. And this is my city, and nobody's going to countermand my orders. I am still the person in charge, and with our council members, we'll make the decision and assume the responsibility. He's an employee that had no right to abandon ship when the people needed him more.
So the waiting game continues as residents of the East Cooper beaches try to rebuild their homes, their public safety departments, and their lives.
Incredible. Damn, I just had the yard cut.
David Walter is a lucky man. He was able to get onto the Isle of Palms by boat and see his house for the first time since the hurricane. It was better than he expected. It's still standing. But inside, floodwater took its toll. He has a lot of work to do, but realizes he was fortunate.
The thing that hurts most is looking around the neighborhood, and I feel somewhat lucky that my house is standing and looking at how many people are going to really be in a position where they may never recover, and the length of time it's going to take to clean up the area.
Others are not as fortunate. There's not a house on the island that went unscathed. Trees and debris block roads, but still, desperate residents tried to sneak back on the island today, despite the warning to stay away.
Dave Waller wants to go to his house to see if it's there on 25th Avenue. They're not allowed to let nobody on the island.
Mike and Carol Pierce could only assess the damage to their house from a boat.
It's going to be a lot of work.
Where's that? Where do you see it? Carol, it's in Louis' yard.
It will be a long time before the Isle of Palms is livable, but it will never be the same. Monica Pellegrini, TV2 Action News, Isle of Palms.
Echo 16, this is Echo 06, over.
Where's? The Intercoastal Waterway near the Ben Sawyer Bridge now looks like a war zone. The U.S. Army hauled in bulldozers, generators, and 1,000 gallons of fuel this morning to begin the long process of rebuilding what Hurricane Hugo destroyed.
We got vehicles that need to get to shore. We got personnel that hadn't even seen their houses right now. Okay, and so what we're trying to do is make it possible for the people like tomorrow to come to their homes and be able to see what it looked like. You know,
The company from Fort Stewart got the call to head to Charleston at 7 last night. By daybreak this morning, the Army had moved into Mount Pleasant and help was on the way. The help consists of 18 pontoon bridges. The Army calls this a bridge, but it's actually a hollow aluminum ferry capable of transporting just about anything the islanders might need. The ferry moves with the help of 2 boats and a guide and can be docked almost anywhere on the island.
Rafting. We're supposed to be here until they get the bridge back there fixed, and then that's all we're going to do.
The Army had hoped to build a bridge with the ferries from Mount Pleasant to Sullivan's Island, but they can't build it through marsh. That means the chances of a bridge to the islands are slim, and the cleanup will take even longer. Shelley Smith, TV2 Action News, Mount Pleasant.
As hundreds of residents gathered at the docks, they were already frustrated over not being able to get to their homes. Some of them had to worry. If their homes were destroyed, would they be allowed to rebuild? Or would they have an otherwise worthless piece of property?
I just can't believe it, you know, how they could enact a law like that for somebody's property that they own. And it just, I mean, if they live there once, why can't they build and build again and live there?
On the ferry ride to Sullivan's Island, we rode by the old village. Considering it's on the water, the damage appeared to be moderate at worst, at least from the boat. On board the ferry, I talked with Myra Hills, who, in her 50 years on the island, has weathered several hurricanes. This time, she evacuated.
This is the first time I've left for a hurricane or anything. I've stayed over there all these years and didn't leave. But the policeman made me leave this time.
He came to your door?
Told me if I didn't leave, he was going to take me by the leg and drag me out.
Transportation was a mixed bag once we got to Sullivan's. Many people walked. One 86-year-old man was being taken around in a wheelbarrow. Several senior citizens were flown out to the island today by the National Guard. The Guard was also out in force, using heavy equipment to clear the roads. Helicopters were moving equipment. And then in stark contrast, an almost humorous sight, a law enforcement official riding a bike. On board the island taxi, in this case a church bus filled with anxious residents, we rode along as the residents would point out the homes of friends. Some of those homes could be fixed. Others were a total loss. You're looking at what appears to be an empty lot. However, from everything we can tell, there used to be 2 homes there. This is Middle Street. There's one of the homes that came from that block, and back behind on the basketball court is yet another home. Across the island, there's all sorts of destruction like this. This is some of the most dramatic and some of the hardest to figure out exactly how these homes got here. While we were at the middle of the street home on Middle Street, along came Charles Hall and his wife Flora, a bottle of wine in hand. Mr. Hall told photographer Todd Pierce and myself that he was going to celebrate one way or another.
Which wasn't very good.
No, it wasn't very good, but look at this.
Oh, I don't believe it, Charlie.
There is not an ounce of water or rain or anything.
There's sand on the floor.
Oh, well, who cares?
I don't care.
Look at this.
Let's get the flag. Stop for a second, okay?
Oh, I gotta get my flag. Gotta get my flag. There we go.
What's your first reaction to what you've seen here?
Just positively exhilaration.
I was all surprised to see this, and that's why I left for Columbia, because I knew that the house would be... How you doing, sir?
All right, welcome home. You just getting back?
Yeah, just now. I just came back in from Columbia, and we
missed the new flood.
The Monday after Hugo was a day many would like to forget. Heavy rains brought flooding to some areas. Others discovered roof leaks were more serious than they thought, creating even more damage. The business world tried to lurch back to life, but most in demand were insurance agents.
Hurricane Hugo blew out the windows of Kathy Jordan's house and flooded the first floor. Insurance will cover the water damage, but her agent's hedging on the property damage payments.
We've lost most everything that we've worked for, and it looks like we're not going to get any of it back.
Neighbors everywhere have survived gale force winds, but the toughest challenge yet may be dealing with insurance adjusters. They are in heavy demand at local offices. Phones are ringing off the hook, and the backload of paperwork is piling up.
This is the largest disaster we've had in 10 years. They haven't seen anything like this on the mainland of the U.S. for quite some time. You looking in the city of Charleston alone, probably 90% of all residences and businesses in the city are damaged.
Bill Lauder never thought the beautiful pine trees surrounding his dream house would one day come crashing through the roof. But when Hurricane Hugo blasted the South Carolina coast, the trees came tumbling down.
It was hard, but, you know, it's not completely devastating. We'll start over.
The insurance adjuster came to assess the damage today.
Now, this is where the trees are laying across right here.
It's gone all the way into the bathroom.
Yeah.
From the first estimate, Lauder may need $30,000 to put the pieces back together. The insurance company will pay whatever it costs to get the trees out of the house, but not for any trees that fell in the yard.
I would say, from assessing what I see here, that it's going to take this portion of the house, about half the house is probably going to have to be completely rebuilt. Nothing salvageable in this room at all. It's all, this part of the house is got to be torn off, and whole roof structure is going to have to be completely rebuilt.
The insurance companies are prepared to give cash advances to people on the spot.
It's not a draft, it's a check, so you can take it to your bank and they'll take care of it.
For Bill Lauder, a check offers a little comfort after Hugo nearly destroyed what he built with his own hands only 3 years ago. Shelley Smith, TV2 Action News, James Island.
The storm ravaged hundreds of businesses. Some will reopen in weeks, others in months. Still others may never reopen. Thousands of people are now unemployed because of Hugo. Many of those people showed up at job service offices looking for temporary or permanent work, anything, just to be able to pay the bills. In McClellanville, by most accounts, ground zero for Hugo, not only was the town bulldozed by the storm surge, but the coastal community's economy revolves around the shrimping industry, and it was left high and dry.
You wouldn't be able to tell it by the looks of Jeremy Creek, but there's enough white shrimp in the waters to make a trawler captain cry. And that's just what many shrimpers are doing at the peak of the season. In McClellanville alone, 35 trawlers have been lost or stranded by the hurricane.
It ruins the whole economy of McClellanville. The entire economy of McClellanville is based on the shrimp industry. And it's terribly detrimental to everybody in McClellanville.
South Carolina's shrimping industry is down, but Governor Campbell promises no one is throwing in the towel. The governor is asking federal relief officials to get the Navy to bring cranes in to lift the beach trawlers and place them back in the creek. The governor also promises to clear the channel and build a new waterfront for McClellanville.
It's going to take time. You can't turn a switch and you can't build a waterfront or build a float and repair a sunken boat or replace it overnight. But we're going to do it.
But for most shrimpers, this season has dried up, and it's a costly matter of waiting until next year.
With the governor's help, we'll be in business next year. And that's going to be the biggest thing, because the season is going to be over before we can get this boat fixed for this year anyway.
And this devastation doesn't just affect the owners of these boats, but also the captain and the crew, many of whom would be saving money for the off-season at this time. However, it's unlikely that anyone saved enough money for an off-season that will last this long. St. Brian, TV2 Action News Update, McClellanville.
Things were so bad in McClellanville that the Marines actually shut the town down for a day so troops could clear roads, pick up downed power lines, and to check for victims. But even the soldiers were surprised by what they saw.
They told us that you were going to see trees down, houses moved, and a lot of people injured. But from what I understand, from what I've seen, it's a lot worse than what they said.
Once the world found out about the damage in the Low Country and McClellanville, the emergency supplies came rolling in.
Anything in particular you need?
Blankets.
Blankets?
Yeah. You have two?
Blankets, that's what else we need.
Churchyards in the small rural town of McClellanville had become muddy parking lots for semis loaded with relief supplies, and more trucks are on the way from all over the country. McClellanville, hit hard by Hurricane Hugo, will be digging out for a long time, and the trucks keep coming. This is what they're hauling. The cargo is laid out on the floors of church sanctuaries, such as this one, the new Wapata Presbyterian Church, USA. Cases of peanut butter, bread, sugar, cereal, and so much more, just about everything imaginable. But too much, too soon. And so now, a little more than a week after the disaster, too many relief trucks are rolling in, with too many supplies, no place to put them. Reverend George Fletcher is pleading now for a slowdown in the relief effort.
If we could stop the inflow, though we appreciate the graciousness of people, we would have time to settle in to find out who needs what and when, rather than waste it.
Kathy Hartzell, a volunteer from Myrtle Beach, is keeping track of the needs. She says there's too much of most things and not enough of what's needed now.
There's a lot of clothes and paper products and things like that, food. We've got plenty of that stuff, but we need baby supplies. We need all the cleaning supplies we can get our hands on. I guess people have already stocked up on as much food as they need. We haven't had people coming in looking for cleaning supplies today. I mean, they just want to get their house cleaned out so they can live in it.
So the town and the people of McClellanville need a break in the flow of supplies. It's doubtful they'll get it. The machinery is in motion. At the very least, they're hoping for a shift in the types of supplies, from food and clothing to buckets and shovels. Terry Casey, TV2 Action News, McClellanville. The aid literally came from across the country, most of it by truck.
We just didn't know what to expect. We thought that there would be some support and a few things sent down, but a massive effort like this is just beyond our comprehension. We didn't have any idea something like this was happening.
Anything to say to the people of Ocean County?
We just want to thank them. I know this is an awful lot of inconvenience for them. They've all got lives to lead, jobs and homes to go back to, and I know this has got to be unpleasant for all of them, but we appreciate what they're doing. We really do.
At times, it was coming faster than relief workers could handle. And after a few days, it became obvious that we had gotten enough food, enough clothes. What was needed was money. Groups like the Red Cross and Salvation Army, working with an army of volunteers, kept the supplies flowing and kept spirits high. Of course, there were so many other people out cutting the trees of their neighbors, helping to patch roofs, and just helping in general in the cleanup effort. There are more stories than we can tell, except to say that it's that spirit of giving that's helping the Low Country rebuild.
Where do we get an appointment?
Well, you need to fill out one of these.
I did. It's done.
Okay, good. Well, then we'll give you a number and we'll
This I got yesterday and filled it out.
Great.
So I'm here to whatever I have to.
She's going to give you a number. That's fine.
Desperate people looking for government aid were met with frustration. Many thought the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is called into action in disasters, was a disaster unto itself.
The system has to be better. Our wonderful national government needs to have a system that can act with even greater urgency and speed.
They said with pride we're going to announce the opening of 5 FEMA offices for 17 counties. Or they said, Senator, you ought to feel good in Charleston. We got 2. I said, where? They said, over on Rittenberg Boulevard and across the Eastern Cup. I said, that's the suburbs. What's the poor fella down in the city going to do? Walk to the blooming place to apply? Come on now. You need 5 in Charleston. What are the people in North Charleston going to do? Nothing? 80,000 people and no office? And they say there's no application, no need. This is the crowd, the button you're supposed to press. They knew it was coming. They could see it down there, of course, at St. Croix and at Puerto Rico. This is the crowd. You press the button, it moves in to help. They have moved in to block. They're the sorriest bunch of bureaucratic jackasses I've ever worked with in my life. And now I've got telephone calls from within FEMA said, Senator, you're exactly right. I've been here 7 years, and they just don't do anything. They study how to deliver the mail after a nuclear disaster.
Later, Senator Hollings called for an investigation of FEMA. It took a while, but hurricane victims unable to get bank loans were able to apply for the low-interest loans to rebuild. Or, if they couldn't qualify for that, a $10,000 grant of federal money. It wasn't much better for those seeking emergency food stamps to feed their families. The lines were long, and the operation had problems.
As the old saying goes, nothing comes for free, and if last week was the indicator, the price of emergency food stamps is long lines filled with frustration.
Our kids ain't even been fed, you know? We dehydrated our babies. I mean, our babies are raw. I mean, what are we supposed to do? God, this ain't government, you know?
Many claim to have waited for as many as 8 hours in the heat, only to be turned away.
As soon as we got up into the door, right, we stand up there, a handful of people, they closed the door and said, come back tomorrow. Why tomorrow? And it's just a handful of people in front of the door.
But today, here at the King Street Fire Station 9 site, things seem to be going somewhat better. In fact, provisions are being made here for people who are not strong enough to wait.
What we usually do here is that we take most of the disabled, the elderly, and the pregnant woman, and we try to get them out and not having them wait in the line to keep the EMS from coming by.
Workers at this site say they will keep on working until everyone is seen. Other emergency food stamp sites are closing as early as 4 o'clock in the afternoon, claiming they have no light to work by.
We should have lights in there. It's harder on us to do that, but we don't have it there. We don't have it in the Felix Pinckney because that area, the lights haven't been on in North Charleston. You know, you can try to tell people, well, no, you come on this day or that day, but they're not going to do that.
The Department of Social Services will dole out some $10 million before this effort is through, and 40,000 people will wait in these lines. Volunteers would make this misery a whole lot easier, as would generators for power. But no one seems to have gotten that far along in this emergency system that will continue throughout the weekend.
When we come back, the story of George Bush's visit to the Low Country to survey the damage. But first, one of the songs that was created after Hugo, symbolizing our new spirit.
Deep in the night, Hugo knocked just to the ground. If he was looking for a fight, he didn't know what he found. 'Cause we've been through this kind of thing before. Earthquake, hurricane, even a war. But there's no way to keep a good time down. There's no way to keep a good time down. As long as we keep helping one another like one big family, sister and brother, then there ain't no way to keep a good time down. All our barrier islands, oh, they're looking like a war zone. And the beaches we love, oh, they're almost all gone. Where there's a will, there's a way. With help from above, we'll build a better day. There's a way to keep a good time down. There's no way down.
I don't have to tell you that Hurricane Hugo was a disaster. 75% of SCE&G's system was destroyed. We normally have 300 crew personnel in the Charleston area, but after Hugo we brought in 2,500 outside utility personnel, all working 16-hour days. With this help, what we thought would take 4 weeks to rebuild was accomplished in just 17 days. But most of all, we want to thank you, our customers, for working with us, being supportive and patient.
Battered but not beaten. That's our new motto at all Gene Reed dealerships. We, like you, felt the full wrath of Hugo, but thank God we're all alive and well. Now's the time to rebuild and to help others less fortunate than you and I. To help, we started a Battered but not beaten fund for the homeless with an initial contribution from our dealerships. If you can help, send your contribution to the Salvation Army Battered but not beaten fund. If we can help you with any of your automotive needs, come see us at Gene Reed Chevrolet, Mitsubishi, Suzuki, or Gene Reed Toyota. Thank you.
Hurricane Hugo, Wrath to Restoration, will continue in a moment.
Hi, everybody. I'm Oprah Winfrey, and it really makes me feel good to be on WCBD with Terry Casey and Leslie Lyles and Dan Ashley and Rob Fowler and the rest of the TV2 Action News team, because these people really do care about everyone in the Low Country. They risked their lives the night Hurricane Hugo devastated the city by staying on the air and keeping you informed. And that is why they are a part of the best news, the best team. TV2 Action News really does work harder to help you. Don't you think, guys?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Remember Thanksgiving dinners at Grandma's. Cool autumn days making warm apple butter. The smell of homemade peach pies spicing the air. Isn't it nice to know that you can still find all the little things that help turn moments into memories all over again at Foodland.
They don't have the right to stop me getting to my home on the Isle of Hawks. I don't care who they are.
This has been a very emotional time for the victims of Hurricane Hugo. A lot of unanswered questions. Among them, what will my insurance cover? For many, though, insurance is a luxury, and they may be added to the rolls of Charleston's new homeless, a population that now numbers more than 30,000 people thanks to Hugo. Lives and homes have been shattered, but people are fighting back. They're picking up the pieces, literally.
And this was the first week we moved in our house. Remember?
Yeah.
That's when those great big palmetto bugs flew in the back door and scared my brother to death when we opened the door.
Becky Adams lives in Copaheat, a coastal community across the tidal marsh from McClellanville. The community of a few hundred was all but flattened by Hugo.
Just talking about the night of September 21st still brings tears to Lawrence Hutt's eyes. Hutt was one of the lucky ones. He got out of the Copaheat community just in time.
And it just started getting worse and worse, and then I could hear the trees breaking, and when I came outside, the waves were starting to break over that road. So I couldn't go that way, and there was a tree top across this one, and I cut through that guy's yard.
It's been 2 weeks since that terrifying night, but not much has changed. There is no power here, no water, no phones, and most important of all, no shelter.
It's a poor community, and the people don't, some of them can't even read and write, and they don't even know where to go. And there hasn't been anybody that I've seen from state or anything back here to help us.
The only evidence of Gladen Harrington's home is the address sign posted outside. Harrington says Copaheat has been forgotten, overshadowed by larger communities.
The hardest thing for me to do was to go through my trailer and find pieces of 35 years.
It's amazing when you look at the destruction here that only one woman died in Copaheat. As if coming home to this rubble weren't hard enough, now residents must fight the looters. Some people are prepared to take the law into their own hands. Others are staying close to home to protect what little is left.
My great-grandfather left me a watch, a pocket watch that was over 100 years old, and it's gone.
Most of these homeowners didn't have insurance. Many don't know where to go to get the help they need. Some couldn't get there even if they wanted to. But hopefully with a little attention, Copaheat can rebuild, even if it means starting from the ground up. Shelley Smith, TV2 Action News, Copaheat.
Shortly after this report aired, the Red Cross and other aid started to arrive in Copaheat. But food, water, and some basic supplies, while welcome, are only temporary measures.
And with this here, we can not worry about the food, at least, and the water. I feel real good about it. There's such nice people all over the United States sending things.
One home is standing in Copaheat. It was built last year to hurricane specifications. That means the home has extra supports built in to help it withstand 130-mile-an-hour winds. What about the island residents who lost their homes and are now contemplating rebuilding? Will they build to hurricane specifications next time?
There really is nothing quite like a stroll on the beach. It's part of what makes life here in the Low Country so enjoyable. But when you live right on the beach, you take your chances with Mother Nature. Hurricane Hugo hit our coastline with a vengeance. These homes never really had a chance. The director of the National Hurricane Center, Dr. Bob Sheets, says if coastal building standards were tougher, like those in Florida, the damage might not have been as serious. But who knows? Many of these homes are in the so-called dead zone, which according to the new beachfront management law may mean some homeowners won't be allowed to rebuild. But those who can inevitably will. A house right on the beach is just too seductive. Is it worth it? Well, if you play the odds, maybe so. In the last 100 years, only 18 hurricanes have made landfall somewhere on the South Carolina coast. But as Hugo showed us, when one does come our way, everything we've worked for is at risk. It seems inevitable, though, that one day, somewhere out there, another storm will form and set its sights on us again.
Much of the debris from Barrier Island homes has ended up in the ocean, making life difficult for shrimpers. This is just one of many shrimpers doing something other than shrimping. He still has his boat, but he's using it now as a ferry.
It's got the whole bottom stirred up where we can't drag, catch trees, bicycles, tricycles, sofas, water heaters, you name it, houses. There were houses floating out in the ocean.
More than 10 shrimp boats sank in the storm. Hugo put many more in unexpected dry dock. Hundreds of pleasure craft were also tossed like toy boats. The result was fuel leaks, and that, combined with debris in rivers and creeks, has sparked fish kills. At the Ports Authority, where ocean-going vessels unload, they have their own set of problems. A $1 million crane toppled and was destroyed. That, along with roof damage and other problems, has resulted in several $1 million in damages. Things were a little better at Charleston International Airport, but roof damage has workers and passengers inconvenienced. The airport's brush with Hugo is indicative of the storm's widespread path of destruction that stretches hundreds of miles inland from Charleston to Charlotte.
A few miles further north in Georgetown, Hugo also left his mark. Business owners on Front Street here are cleaning up after Hugo swept through, and all of the debris you see there was washed in by rising tides from the Sanpete River.
For days, we've been showing you pictures like these from areas near the ocean. But this place is about 60 miles inland, near Utahville in Orangeburg County. One resident says it's about time everyone knows how bad it is.
Until today, no one had really been down here to see this damage. Now everything is fine. People, not so much from the county council, but people from other areas have just been absolutely fantastic.
The relief has come from Hilton Head, Beaufort, and today the federal government. This truck brought USDA pork to a Utahville auto repair shop, now serving as a food distribution center.
Some areas of North Charleston are alive and well. Others are dead, gone forever.
I think the trees have made quite an impact, the loss of them, I should say, of the trees have made quite an impact. The area around Park Circle just is almost unrecognizable.
Terry, Leslie, if the world has really forgotten St. Stephen, as the mayor had said earlier this week, it doesn't show here. Truckloads of food and clothing have been shipped in from all over the country. It's actually overwhelmed this community and helped hundreds. I spoke to one young woman earlier today who was helped also. 26-year-old Sandra Dingle can't stand coming home.
I cried when I first saw it. I cried because really I have no place else to go right now. You know, I'm staying at a friend's house, but, you know, how long can I stay there? We need shelter.
It has been 1 week since Hurricane Hugo barreled its way through St. Stephen, leaving hundreds homeless.
Iva Jordan can't believe her own eyes. Even a week after Hurricane Hugo bashed the shores of Lake Marion, there are still constant reminders of Hugo's wrath. Lake Marion Shores is an older community in Clarendon County. Although it's 70 miles from the coast, the destruction here is much like Charleston.
I was just laying here and the tree fell, and I didn't know exactly what it was. And then the insulation, it was all over me.
Karen Cheek is lucky this tree didn't kill her. It wasn't until she tasted insulation in her mouth that she knew the roof was caving in. Hugo flattened Cheek's garage, but the Volkswagen inside survived. The Baker family built this house with their own hands, but when the eye of the storm blew through Lake Marion, it took half the house with it. As you can see, one of the first things people will need are carpenters and roofers, and in Clarendon County, those are hard to find.
For a group of neighbors living on Runnymede Lane in Somerville, tonight was a time to relax and to be thankful that Hurricane Hugo didn't destroy everything they had. Before Hugo hit, most were too busy to spend much time together, but the storm that ripped apart their yards brought these people closer together.
The good thing about this hurricane is I got to know my neighbors a lot better. I think that's been such a plus.
And while the folks in Somerville are making real progress in putting their community back together, still, everywhere you turn, there are reminders that Flower Town will never really look quite the same.
Education in the Low Country was disrupted by the storm. Charleston County schools took the hardest hits, students winding up with an unplanned 3-week vacation. 500,000 people evacuated their homes when Hugo approached, one of the largest coastal evacuations ever. Hundreds of lives were probably saved because the complacency of many coastal residents was replaced this time with real concern.
The first question many of us are asking is, why Charleston? Why the Low Country? Well, the answer isn't very simple, but maybe by taking a look at Hugo from start to finish, we can better understand the storm and its behavior.
We know where Hugo ended his path of destruction, but where did Hugo begin? Hugo was born on the 9th of September as a tropical wave moving off the coast of Africa near the Cape Verde Islands. This in itself made us take notice. Historically, storms forming close to the Cape Verdes have been the most destructive of all time. Hurricanes Camille and Gilbert, two prime examples. By September 11th, the wave became a tropical depression. Winds continued to increase, and that afternoon, Hugo was officially named.
Here is the latest satellite picture of Tropical Storm Hugo, upgraded to a tropical storm earlier this afternoon. There it is right there.
Hugo kept getting stronger. It only took 48 hours for Hugo to become the 6th hurricane of the 1989 hurricane season. This is what we had to say on September 13th.
That's right, it is now a hurricane. You can see it right there.
The brighter white cloud tops indicating some colder cloud tops, some pretty good thunderstorm activity. That means it is fairly well organized. Right now, the winds are at 75 miles per hour, so a minimal hurricane.
The discussion from the National Hurricane Center that night said, system is expected to remain embedded in deep easterlies for the next 3 days and has every opportunity for continued intensification. Little did they know Hugo would get as strong as it did. By September 18th, Hugo had already done extensive damage to Guadeloupe, the U.S. Virgin Island of St. Croix, and finally Puerto Rico, which experienced 140-mile-per-hour winds and some 4 to 8 inches of rain. As Hugo moved over mountainous Puerto Rico, some of his punch was lost. Winds were knocked down to 105 or Category 2 level. Regardless, residents of the southeastern United States were definitely taking notice as Hugo was seemingly setting his sights on an area from the Carolinas to Florida.
Here is the upper air pattern for the 72 hours extending all the way into Thursday. We'll have a high pressure out here in the Atlantic Ocean, low pressure in the Gulf of Mexico. That means the hurricane seemingly will be steered into the southeast coast, kind of like a pinball in a pinball machine. It'll be bounced off the low and bounced off the high, and here's the corridor we think it will take over the next several days.
By Wednesday night, September 20th, it became more evident Hugo was going to make a call on South Carolina, specifically the Charleston area. Residents began evacuating inland. We felt confident a hurricane warning would be issued soon. It was bright and early Thursday morning, the 21st morning of September. At this time, winds were 110, but Thursday would be the day Hugo grew bigger and stronger, becoming a Category 4 hurricane with winds of 135 miles per hour. Now moving northwesterly at just more than 20 miles per hour, we knew it wouldn't be much longer before Hugo would strike, and strike big. This is the way Hugo looked on radar as the eye wall was crashing into the coastline. Winds gusted over 100 miles per hour in downtown Charleston. By midnight, the eye had moved over the Isle of Palms. Massive destruction had already occurred, with the second half of Hugo still to come. For many of us, that was the worst part. After destroying much of this area, Hugo raced inland through the Palmetto State, doing additional damage. North Carolina was next, with Charlotte taking a beating as well. By dinner time Friday, Hugo had weakened below tropical storm status and was already in Pennsylvania. The storm of the century was no more, but ugly reminders were everywhere.
If you look at the destruction, we're looking at about a 100-mile section of the coast. If you go from Folly Beach all the way up to the Myrtle Beach area with significant damage over that 100 miles. That didn't occur in Camille. It was over smaller sections and, again, more damage in a smaller area, but extensive.
Now that Hugo is come and gone, we look forward to a future of rebuilding. A future hopefully filled with more advancements in weather technology so we can continue to give you the advance warning needed to stay out of harm's way.
1 week after the storm, President George Bush arrived in the Low Country to survey the damage firsthand. Air Force One touched down at the Charleston Air Force Base about 7 this morning. The president arriving for a hastily arranged first-hand look at a critically wounded South Carolina. Rough weather forced a change in plans, and Mr. Bush wound up here in Summerville, scrapping plans to visit hard-hit McClellanville and Myrtle Beach. At one point, the president's motorcade stopped. He got out to talk with a handful of residents. Throughout the 2-hour visit, the president was accompanied by Governor Campbell, who spearheaded Bush's southern presidential campaign.
What I have seen in this state is a pulling together of people, and I've never been prouder to be a governor of a state and the people than I am of this state right now because of what people have done to help each other.
The president, on his tour, made a point of defending federal relief efforts. They've been sharply criticized by U.S. Senator Ernest Hollings, among others, as too little and not in time.
I am satisfied that the federal government has moved and moved expeditiously. You know, it's easy to criticize.
The president signed a more than $1 billion hurricane relief package on the way to South Carolina, and he wrote a $1,000 personal check to the American Red Cross after he got here. The Justice Department is sending $1 million to help with police overtime and repair of equipment. The Commerce Department is pumping $5 million into efforts to help more than 500,000 displaced workers. Returning to the Charleston Air Force Base, Mr. Bush made a brief, formal statement.
Even though the trip was short, I had a chance to talk to some of the people, and I commend the spirit of the people of South Carolina.
The president reportedly very moved by the slice of devastation he saw, by the outpouring of generosity from all quarters, and by the needs in all quarters. And that is what he is taking back to the White House. The national press was along for the president's visit. They were also here before, during, and after Hugo. But as is often the case, the aftermath of Hugo has been replaced by other headline stories. But when Oprah Winfrey brought her show to town 2 weeks after Hugo, national attention was focused on the relief effort needed for the Charleston area.
We're on location today at the King Street Palace in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'm standing here today in the midst of the brave souls that battled Hurricane Hugo, and they survived it. Yes!
It was fitting the show would be held downtown. You have to wonder how the historic buildings would compare Hugo to other hurricanes they've weathered. But the 300-year-old buildings held up pretty well. That's important because most view this area as the anchor of the tourist trade that is so vital to the Tri-County's economy. The high-rent district near the Battery appeared to weather the storm well, despite 5 feet of water. It was there that Leslie Lyles spoke with Mayor Joseph Riley about Charleston's efforts to rebuild.
How do you think Charleston got through it? Would you have done anything differently?
Not a thing. Wouldn't have changed a thing. And one of the very fortunate things that we did is I asked Barbara Vaughn to call some mayors in cities that had had hurricanes and asked them what had happened and what they had learned, what was a surprise. One of the mayors said, "Cry wolf if you have to," and that was so helpful in getting us to have the frame of mind about getting people out.
In the rebuilding process, will we rebuild anything differently to be more hurricane sound and hurricane sure, do you think?
Well, I think one of the things that I want us to look at is our building codes. And
I think a lot of people were surprised when right after the storm, shortly after the storm, you were encouraging tourism.
We made a special effort to be able to say that the tourists could come back, and the horses and buggies are now on the streets, and the bus tours, and people are walking, the chimes are ringing, and people are back, and that's our economy. And
when you emerged from City Hall after the storm in the dark, were you surprised by what you saw?
Whole second floor of one building in the street and the parapets of others and all the roofing material, and I was really frightened that it's just that preliminary little glimpse that of what the ultimate collective disaster might be.
Mayor Riley, Governor Campbell, and President Bush have started the aid money flowing, by some estimates $2 billion. But the damage estimates continue to rise. Matching the aid in its various forms to victims' needs is not a short-term exercise, and this is a disaster of major proportions. The amount of debris left by the storm is staggering. A ride through Snee Farm this week shows a wall of trees, limbs, and various other storm trash. The story stretches well beyond Charleston County. You'll find the same thing in Berkeley, Dorchester, Georgetown, and other counties. Destruction has set the forests back at least 50 years, and many 100-year-old trees are gone. They simply can't be replaced. The storm swept trees and shrubs from yards as well, and in this way, Hugo has changed the face of the Low Country. The full effect of Hugo on the Low Country's economy isn't easy to judge this soon after the storm. The number of jobless will depend on the number of damaged businesses that reopen. The tourists will be back, but not in the numbers we've seen lately, at least not yet. But the beaches are still a magnet, and so the owners of summer rental markets on the islands have 7 months to rebuild for next summer's season. Some people's lives will never be the same. The 5,000 families whose homes were destroyed will have the toughest battle back. Another 17,000 families are also homeless tonight. Their homes are uninhabitable, but their homes can be repaired, assuming they have insurance or can get a low-interest loan or some other aid. Despite these monumental material losses, we can't forget the 26 who died in Hugo's swelled surf or the gale-force winds that pummeled the homes. The death count is high. It could have been staggering. It is only because of the mass evacuation that Hugo wasn't a bigger disaster. Community leaders, in concert with the media, got the word out early and often, and the Low Country listened. And for that, we should be thankful. But what about next time? Will this storm be enough to wipe out the complacency so many had felt about tropical storms and hurricanes? We have all learned a lesson about taking things for granted. Have you ever valued running water or electricity as much as you did in the days that followed Hugo? Even tonight, though, thousands still don't have electricity, despite an army of power crews from across the South working 7 days a week. Strike up the band and let's hear it for the spirit of the people. This was the Raise the Roof rally, one of many programs aiming to bridge the gap between public and private aid programs and put a roof over everyone's head. From hot dogs and flag waving to singing, it's great to see the Lowcountry coming back from the raft and headed to restoration. We will all carry mental images of Hugo. Allow us to share a few we found. The Coburg Dairy cow before Hugo. And now after Hugo. The cow is in a different pasture. Boats were found everywhere, from the 10th green at Wild Dunes to a new mooring downtown, or perhaps an unlucky owner who thought otherwise. This shot almost defies description, except to say that it's all that was left. The images of the Ben Sawyer Bridge may best capsulize the whole Hugo experience. A police car races across the bridge the night of the storm. That night, the bridge spun wildly, and we found it the next day useless, and island residents powerless to return to their homes. But after days of hard work, the Ben Sawyer is put back in place. Once again, residents can travel the span. We all have bridges to cross if life is to return to normal.
From the outset, they warned this could be the year of the big one. They were painfully right. Hurricane Hugo seared our hearts and minds with a kaleidoscope, a horrifying kaleidoscope of sights and sounds, a kaleidoscope of memories. Our cleanup is underway now, but 3 weeks ago, we were all in a state of shock on the heels of Hurricane Hugo's savage sweep across South Carolina. It seems so long ago, but the memories are so vivid it also seems like just yesterday. 3 weeks ago, we were paralyzed by a killer storm that took homes and jobs and so much that was familiar to us. The trees, the loss of them, will be a horrible reminder for years. But what emerged from the onslaught has been the strength and the spirit of a people who won't be beaten by Hugo or anything else. And people are the real story of the storm. So many suffered and still are. So many risked their lives to save others. A handful sounded the warnings and led throughout the siege. And so many gave and are continuing to give so that we can rebuild physically and emotionally. That is the story of Hugo. That's also the spirit that must continue, that must prevail, really, if we are ever to be again what we were in the Low Country. I'm Terry Casey for the TV2 Action News Team, rebuilding in the aftermath of Hurricane Hugo.
Ladies and gentlemen, Charleston County is now under a state of emergency. It is anticipated that Hurricane Hugo will be in the Charleston area earlier than first reported. Gale force winds are predicted by 3 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, making weather conditions...
Where does it end? Let's make a start. Take my hand and you and I will do our part. How did it start? Let's make it end. The time has come for you and I to help a friend. 'Cause people that you may not know, although they could be you, were there but for the grace of God. It's time to see them through. Hands holding hands, coming together, hearts touching hearts, taking part, making it better. Hands holding hands, helping friends. We're pulling together, hearts touching hearts, taking part, hands holding hands. There is a world outside your door, and it's time to give it love like never before. I know that you care. Come take a stand. Give it all. Get in line. Lend a hand. 'Cause people that you may not know, although they could be you, were there but for the grace of God. It's time to see them through. Hands holding hands, coming together, hearts touching hearts, taking part, making apart. We're making it better.
The Hugo is now a dangerous extreme.
A VHS copy of this program may be purchased by sending a check or money order in the amount of $14.95 to the TV2 Disaster Relief Fund in care of WCBD TV. Post Office Box 879, Charleston, South Carolina 29402. Please do not send cash and allow 3 to 4 weeks for delivery. The address again is the TV2 Disaster Relief Fund in care of WCBD TV. P.O. Box 879, Charleston, South Carolina 29402. All proceeds from the sale of this tape will be donated to the Hurricane Hugo Disaster Relief Fund. Hurricane Hugo, Wrath to Restoration, has been brought to you by Gene Reed Dealerships. Our business is saving you money. By Foodland, the store that cares. And by the people at SCE&G. This is a TV2 Action News Brief.
I'm Bill Baird. It'll be a chilly night of high school football, but the Channel 2 cameras will be there and we'll have highlights.
I'm Margaret Morris, and you may want to bundle up if you're going out tonight. I'll have your chilly forecast.
I'm Leslie Lyles. We'll tell you how all this cold is going to affect those left homeless by Hugo.
And I'm Dan Ashley. We'll also tell you about medical heroes from Hugo tonight.
For quick relief, contact TV2's Action Line. It's a real solution to life's little problems. Write Action Line, Box 879, Charleston. The TV2 Action News Team, working harder, helping you.
Good evening. I'm Hugh Downs.
And I'm Barbara Walters, and this is 2020.
From ABC News, around the world and into your home, the stories that touch your life. With Hugh Downs and Barbara Walters, this is 2020. Tonight.
The death, the homicide, the teenage pregnancy, the homelessness, that's not Martin Luther King's dream, that's his nightmare.
The challenge of inner city kids. Some people talk of a lost generation. Michael Cross fights back, puts young lives on track by teaching boys to be men, not macho.
Before, we was like bad little kids. And then when Mr. Cross came, we turned into good kids.
Stone Phillips reports, one man racing the future. Still time to change. Lawsuits, huge settlements. But business says that we pay every day. That many activities cost more. That in many areas, new products are held back because companies fear they'll be sued.
You may be entitled to compensation.
Business says it's costing America dearly.
Products not introduced. Jobs not created.
John Stossel lets them make their case. Lawsuit sickness.
And as I looked up, I saw cars in front of me just sinking. Everybody was sinking and all the pavement was just tumbling and falling.
Highway 880. From survivors and rescuers who were on the scene. New accounts of what it was like.
Nothing in life prepared any of us for what we were seeing. All I could say is, I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
Lynn Scher reporting from Oakland, staring at death and searching for life.
And that's where we begin tonight, in Oakland, California, Highway 880. Not the epicenter of Tuesday's earthquake, but in terms of human tragedy, definitely the focal point. Lynn Scher is standing by live in Oakland, and in a moment she'll bring us new eyewitness accounts of the freeway's collapse and the initial efforts of rescue workers.
First, a brief look at some of what's happened today. President Bush arrived in California this morning to show his concern. He was briefed by federal officials, and then hopscotched the quake zone to see pockets of devastation. He stopped first at the collapsed freeway, and then helicoptered over to the small town of Santa Cruz, 9 miles from the quake's epicenter. Mr. Bush promised state and local officials that federal aid would not get bogged down in red tape. The president said he was especially touched by a meeting with the father of the little boy who was pulled alive from a crushed automobile under Highway 880, and you'll hear more about that child in Lynn's report.
The latest word from that site is that 32 bodies have been pulled from the wreckage. Some 45 to 50 cars remain buried, and it's unclear whether, as we put it earlier, many of those cars are empty. There has been hope that some occupants were able to escape moments before the highway collapsed. And it's those dramatic and horrifying moments and the minutes that followed that Lynn Shure has been focusing on. Lynn is with us now live from Oakland. Lynn?
Barbara, as you can see, it is dark here. It is getting chilly. The wind is coming up and rain is predicted. But still, the rescue teams are going to be working throughout the night at the section of collapsed highway behind me. They've already made considerable progress. Just today, we're told that they pulled the bodies of 13 victims from the rubble. But there are just untold numbers more left to find. And you know, that work has really taken its toll on the workers. We're told that psychologists have been brought in to deal with them because they are so overwhelmed by the enormity of their task. It is these people, and it is this spot in Oakland, that have been the center of the search for life.
When I looked up and I saw all the cars tumbling and all the guardrails falling off and everything, I thought, oh my God, it's an earthquake. And then I thought maybe it was a bomb.
This was like the seventh ring of hell. It was